Hello and welcome to Moist Talk, a Blaseball podcast centered around the team Canada Moist Talkers. I'm your host, KeCh Knightley, and in this episode, we interviewed some longtime Moist Talker fans who are going to give you a little bit of a piece of what it was like to be a Blaseball fan during the Discipline and Expansion eras, hitting many of the cultural beats of the team. We hope you learned something, and most of all, that you enjoy. Be kind, be gross. Let's get to the interviews. All right. Can you just state for the record, what name do you go by in Blaseball Spaces, and when did you start following the Moist Talkers?
I go by the name Kosmo in Blaseball Spaces, and I started following the Moist Talkers basically season 1.
We go by L, but collectively we're known as the Shards. Been following Blaseball since partway through season 2, but basically fully jumped on board in season 3.
Hi, I'm Cyndakip. You can call me Cinda. I joined the Talkers partway through season 3.
So in the main core and most online spheres, I go by Sanic. I have been a Blaseball fan, especially for the Moist Talkers, since roughly season 4. It was the middle of season 4, I remember that.
Without mentioning any key players or events, what do the Moist Talkers mean to you?
Someone, and I don't remember who, someone from a different team once described the Moist Talkers as being this kind of game of yes and, but like a really warm, open game of yes and, where I feel safe saying all of us are kind of weirdos in one way or another, and it's a bunch of people just throwing out weird ideas and vibing with that, and I think it's a really cool thing that we have.
Like all teams, I assume the Moist Talkers are a community of like-minded weirdos and freaks, but I guess we wouldn't really have it any other way. I mean, from what I can tell, there's a large portion of fans that are either actually Canadian or from a place outside of the US, but it also has like a lot of people drawn to the absurdity of the talking moistly aspect, where I guess every other team largely makes sense, relatively speaking. But yeah, I think above all else, it's about community and, dare I say, friendship.
Honestly, it's our little slogan kind of fits it. Be gross, be kind. We have our gross moments, but we also have our nice moments, which I think balances out quite nicely, and that's kind of why I stuck with it the longest.
Not to be like dramatic or anything, but the Moist Talkers mean so much to me. Like, being part of this team has literally changed my life, and it is so weird to think that I almost didn't join it. The one thing that swayed me was reading on the wiki that the Talkers played in Halifax, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's my home. And then the Talkers really did become my home. Like, I cannot imagine, ever leaving this team. I mean, there are other teams out there that are great and that I love to hang out with and have really fun lore and stuff, but like, I can't imagine not being a Moist Talker. I've been here for my entire Blaseball experience, and I love the vibes of the team. I love how we're committed to our community values, be kind, be gross, in that order. And I really feel like we're all, we're a pretty big team, but we have like such a high percentage of like just really wonderful, great, creative people, and we're all just so supportive of each other. And we just like, I would not, writing for the Talkers is what got me to love writing again and to believe in myself. And I have made some of my closest friends ever on this team, one of whom is now my queer platonic partner. Shout out to Mossy Kit, love you. I mean, I love the Talkers.
What is your first memory of the Canada Moist Talkers? How did you come to know them beyond the team name?
So the first thing that really stuck out for me in the group chat of the Canada Moist Talkers was watching a game with our pitcher who, as of last appearance, is now a garage, Oliver Not a Robot. And the way that the fans in the chat really kept up the kayfabe of Oliver not a robot, being a robot pretending to be a person, and saying things like, well, he's just having trouble pitching because of his perfectly normal human claws are having trouble holding the ball, or the moisture is getting to his normal human skin seams. And I saw that, and I saw Eugenia garbage, and I said, okay, well, this is the team. This is the team I'm meant to be here. These people are perfect.
The first memory that I really have for the Moist Talkers was learning some of the player-specific chants, mostly for Eugenia Garbage and Joe Voorhees, while catching a loading ready run stream. It was showing off the simulator and like explaining things to people. Like I was already an account holder at that point and had picked Canada as my team because that's typically what I do. Not being in the US, you might be able to tell, but I hadn't really settled in yet. But hearing about how much people loved Richmond Harrison, for example, despite basically just being a random name and a string of numbers, that sort of clicked that narrative nerve, the creative aspect. I guess it was all downhill from there. Once we started looking into the art and all the creative elements that was coming out of this, that's what solidified the choice. And specifically, it was learning about Mooney Doctor that made that decision for us. Someone who was relatively normal in this world of the comparatively abnormal. And that sort of idea has been in a lot of sort of creative contributions to the team, but that is when I started looking into the team as an actual team rather than just an interesting name.
I think it was Elijah Bates, actually, whose Wikipedia page I first stumbled across and read like about how his cheer was by the fans was Bates can't bat, and thought that was funny. And after that, I sort of started like looking through all the team members, and the more I read about them, the more outlandish it seemed. And yeah, I think that's kind of what solidified it after. I can't believe it was Elijah of all characters, but yeah, rest in violence.
I do remember just, joining the Discord and seeing, like people just watching the games together and like how we were, in the playoffs and everyone was all excited and just like cheering for our players. And they had all these fun cheers like Garbage Day and Bates can bat and can't crack the code and all that. And it just really felt like, like it meant something, like these weren't just names and statistics on a screen. It was, like we had made these players mean something. They meant something to us. And like, I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be there cheering on these players with everyone. It just like, it was just a really nice feeling of, being a part of something with everyone.
Who have you thought of as captains of the team?
Overall, Trevino Merritt and Kennedy Alstott are the founders of the team in my head, because a lot of the early players never really got a chance to shine or be loved. Likewise, Tyler Violet is also slightly before my time, but yeah, them as well on the list.
Pretty much the universal interpretation is that our original captain was Tyler Violet, Ty Vi, who was a little bit before my time. They died just a couple days before I joined. And I know even at that point, there was already lore about their replacement, Ziwa Mueller, kind of, stepping up and kind of taking their place and just like, trying to fill their shoes and carry on their legacy. And I don't know if they were the official captain at that point, but definitely over the course of the Discipline era, we all kind of came to see Ziwa as our captain.
For as long as I've known, it was Ziwa Mueller. I did remember like hearing whispers of Ty Vi and how Ziwa kind of stepped up after Ty Vi's incineration. But by then, Ziwa was pretty much established as the new, or I guess the current captain. So since then, they've always been my captain.
I kind of go with the kind of accepted idea that Zewa Mueller is the captain of the team, or was the captain of the team, and before that, Tyler Violet was. But has Zewa got unceremoniously traded away? I kind of like the idea that there's a bunch of people trying to fill that void in. That maybe Eugenia and Greerlot and Jenkins Good are trying to fill in that void.
From my actual experience, Zewa Mueller was the captain until getting traded and redacted and everything, and then Eugenia Garbage had to step up. I think the Greer likes to think that she's up there, but not with that attitude.
All right, now we'll get into a little bit of the thick of Canada Moist Talkers in the Discipline era. It is said that in Season 6, the Canada Moist Talkers tried to bring a player back from the dead. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh boy, yeah, Necromancy. That was a time.
Oh boy, the Necromancy. Okay.
The resurrection of Jalen Hot Dog Fingers is one of the most important defining events, I would say, of Blaseball. I think it really set the tone for what the community can do.
So early in Season 6, we had a couple feedbacks really close together, Lachlan Shelton and our beloved best friend, Richmond Harrison. And, we were not very happy about that. And we were kind of looking for a way to, I guess, kind of get out all our anger and frustration and, kind of get some revenge, I guess. And
so we may have gone a little Richmond crazy. Just a little bit.
You can draw a line directly from Richmond Harrison to Ruby Tuesday. And that's because we lost Richmond Harrison. He left us from the Moist Talkers. He was taken from us. And the rage that we felt that the game took Richmond Harrison from us resulted in us resurrecting a player from the dead.
That was right around the time the idol board had just been introduced.
And that's when people discovered that dead players could still be memorialized as favorites. And anyone who knows anything about the narrative of how magic works, like just in fiction in general, there is power in knowing a name.
I don't remember if it was someone from outside the team or if it was someone from within the team who has been in the main channel, finding out about Jalen's resurrection, or the plan for resurrecting Jalen. And at the time, the Talkers were one of the more larger teams in terms of fans. We thought the idea of resurrecting a player just because we could through the idol board, we thought was really neat. So we all decided, okay, we'll put all our votes into, most of us will try to find ways to either encourage people to get Jalen on the board, or we try to discourage others from getting other players on the board. I believe Dot was already on there by then.
Our original plan, I think, was to go for one of our players, maybe Tyler Violet, but then we realized, if we wanted to get enough people behind this to make this work, it had to be, a player that the whole league could get behind. So that's how it ended up being, Jalen Hot Dog Fingers, kind of first in, first out. Jalen Hot Dog Fingers was the first player to ever be incinerated, way back at the end of Season 1 when the Forbidden Book was opened. She was the star pitcher for the Seattle Garages and got incinerated when the Forbidden Book was opened. And so, we figured the most, if we were going to do Necromancy, it would be even more of a big statement if we picked the very first player to die. And we figured, probably she's the one who most deserves it and the one who would make the biggest statement and the one that the whole league could get behind. It can often get forgotten that the Talkers were actually the ones who started the Necromancy, considering that, Jalen was a Garages player and the Garages resurrected her. I mean, as they should. She was their player. But it was our idea. Was it a good idea? I don't know. But it was certainly an interesting one that had very interesting results.
All right, and you've definitely led up to it. What happened on Ruby Tuesday?
Consequences.
We got to experience the consequences of our hubris. But I remember watching it very distinctly. It was a huge moment in that you got to see the team come together to build something and then have it taken away from us almost immediately.
But I guess in all seriousness, it was calmer, like from a narrative point of view. The Moist Talkers kicked off the Necromancy and the subsequent payback, so I guess it was only fitting that the Moist Talkers were the first to feel that retribution.
Basically, Ruby Tuesday is what we call the two games between the Talkers and the Tigers, where between us we lost 5 players to incineration. So we bring Jalen back from the dead. Season 7, she starts hitting players with pitches, making them unstable. And for a while, we don't know what this does. And it eventually goes away. And then all of a sudden we find out what it does. It was a game between us, the Moist Talkers, and the Hades Tigers, where several of their players were unstable.
I remember this because it was literally a Tuesday and I'd gotten back from like a late class, so I was dead tired, but I had to see what was going on with Blaseball. And we were up against the Tigers that time, and Jalen had spread the modification? Unstable, thank you. Instability onto, I think, Yasmin Mason and one of the other Talkers. And at first we thought, oh, it should be fine. Then we saw it was a solar eclipse weather.
Being unstable in an eclipse meant a lot higher chance of being incinerated.
And I distinctly remember people just repeatedly saying, nothing bad ever happens to the Moist Talkers.
So, going into that game, Moody Cookbook and McLaughlin Scorpler on the Tigers were both unstable after being hit by Jalen's pitches. And it was an eclipse game. And that was when we finally found out what unstable does. Because a few innings in, Moody Cookbook was incinerated, and the message also said, a debt has been collected. And the instability changed to one of our players, Elijah Bates, who was then incinerated very soon after. Scorpler was also incinerated before the end of the game, and that was 3 players gone just like that in one game, all because we brought back Jalen from the dead. And the next game was also an eclipse, and we knew, we were still very much in danger. But, we got our brand new player, KeCh Familia, who was Elijah's replacement, and we kind of went all in on luring her because she was our first new player we had for a long time.
I believe it was actually, after Bates, where KeCh came in, and we got super excited with a name like KeCh Familia that we all got to work.
We went into Siesta because I think the game ban felt bad, that suddenly a lot of players died all at once, and the simulator was being cruel, as it is wont to do. So we had an hour with KeCh, and we did a speedrun lore jam on KeCh. And so we built this player that we instantly fell in love with.
And she did hit a few dingers, that's for sure.
And then had her immediately taken away from us in the next game when she was incinerated. KeCh played 5 and I think 1/3 innings. Ruby Tuesday was an incredible experience to sit through because it was just so chaotic and also just this amazing part of community coming together to make something.
So we had a good time, as good of a time as we could, doing that. But then, the next game started up and she just was gone, just like that, incinerated less than an inning into the game. Not even unstable, just bad luck or maybe an extra punishment for our hubris. And, then before the end of the game, we also lost Antonio Wallace, who had become unstable in the previous game. And that was 5 players dead in 2 games, just like that. It's, kind of interesting, I think, how, necromancy was our idea, and we were the ones who were basically one of the first teams to suffer the consequences, and one of the teams who suffered the most from it, since we also lost Workman Gloom later in the season as a result of it. And yeah.
All right, and to lighten the mood a little bit, what is the orb?
I think a wise person would ask, what is orb not?
You do not just question what is the orb. You don't ask who is the orb or what is the orb. It is simply the orb. It's just been there for as long as we could remember. Sure, we had multiple mascots before the orb, but that doesn't mean that the orb wasn't there. It's always been there. You just had to look up sometimes.
Oh, you do not question the orb. Orb is orb. Embrace orb. But no,
I mean, orb is orb. It's loving and omnipresent. It is a light in the cold and the dark and the ash. Orb is basically the perfect life form. Just embrace orb. Just let go and revel in its glory. Orb is one of our mascots and is largely the fault of an emoji coding error that turned the typically blue speaking head emoji on a white background into a white head on a white background that appears on the site as a solid white circle. Praise Orb.
So we had this white icon next to our name. And we said, okay, so we have an orb next to our name. What is orb? And orb is just one of the weird semi-godlike creatures as come out of the Gleek and the Underarena. We made Orb part of our team. Orb was a mascot for I believe season 7 mascot. There's a Blaseball card for Orb. I love Orb is just there now. It's just part of our team. I love that when they set up the lore channel for us during the Fall Guys season that we're currently in. They didn't put the spitting guy emoticon for us. They gave us orb. And I think that's perfect. I think that's really indicative of us turning nothing into something. And also committing to the bit. We commit to the bit very well.
We consider it basically the symbol of the talkers rather than the actual, moist speaking emoji. The orb is the true symbol of the talkers.
All right, and drawing towards the end of the Discipline era, the era was shadowed by the looming figure that was the Shelled One. How did the rise and fall of the Shelled One affect the talkers?
I was going to say that largely it didn't, because the talkers really only have the one speed, and it tended to be unworthy of divine focus, not really being as successful a team as many of us would have preferred. But then I remember how we got involved with the sacrifice and all the peanut-based elements of what was happening. And it's just if that hadn't happened, then our star pitcher, Polka Dot Patterson, wouldn't have gotten involved in being shelled as well, and the entire events that happened afterwards. So, I guess there was basically a fair amount of effect on the Moist Talkers.
Well, I think I'd say we were one of the teams who has been more affected by the Shelled One, since, we had a pretty high amount of, incinerations and feedbacks and, various consequences for having opened the Forbidden Book and faced the wrath of the Shelled One, and some of these more self-inflicted than others, like Ruby Tuesday. But I think it's also nice because we were, pretty significantly involved in the defeat of the Shelled One, with, two of our former players, KeCh Familia and Workman Gloom, who basically died because of the Shelled One, coming back from the dead and helping to take it down. So it was nice to kind of play a more active role in the defeat of it, after all we had suffered because of it.
Sorry, can you explain a little bit more about how Workman Gloom and KeCh Familia got released because of or in combat with the Shelled One?
Yeah, so they were in the Hall of Flame after having died, and there was a list in the Hall of Flame of players, and if you paid tribute to the players with peanuts or tiny eggs, which we liked to do to give to the monitor, the players with the most tributes on the list got to come back as part of a team called the Hall Stars and got to fight the Shelled One. And since, those were two of our more well-known players, Workman Gloom, famous for, being a great hitter in general, but also specifically hitting a home run after being incinerated. KeCh Familia, of course, being famous for playing less than a full game before being incinerated. So, they were pretty popular players league-wide, and so they got to be part of the Hall Stars and come back and help take down the Shelled One. That was pretty great.
I mean, I think the biggest thing that the Shelled One did to us was when Polka Dot Patterson got shelled. Polka Dot Patterson came to us in the third season, and I remember them being terrifyingly good. I remember seeing that we got them and going, wait, what do you mean we're the Moist Talkers? Why do we have Polka Dot Patterson? It didn't feel right. It felt weird. And at the same time, Polka Dot Patterson felt very mercenary and very professional and very closed off. So it was this interesting person to get. And we kind of, obviously we integrated Dot into our team, and we basically sacrificed Dot. We put Dot in the way of the Shelled One to protect York Silk, and we lost our star pitcher for a season. Basically all of season 8, we didn't have Dot. And to me, the biggest impact that the Shelled One had on us was kind of us starting to reach out to protect other teams, and to kind of reach out to other teams in general, and kind of getting into the many teams one league space. And then of course the monitor came and saved Dot, made them who they are today. But it's so funny, like, we kind of avoided plot for a while until we inserted ourselves into the story. But we didn't face off against the pods. It was really Dot. It was really us putting Dot in the way to protect a kid.
I do remember when the idol boards were happening and the Shelled One just showed up on our screen out of nowhere. I thought, this is new. Never seen this before. It's, I believe, when random shellings would occur and peanut weather was a big deal. And it was when we started noticing that people were getting shelled, we're like, okay, that is concerning. Then a certain specific, like, peanut based event happened with the talkers that I'm sure we'll get into later. And we started just having fun with it. Yeah, sure, the Shelled One was terrifying. Just the concept of it, though, still also very funny, because imagine a giant peanut shell with a loud booming voice just yelling at you for not getting their 3 special boys up on the idol board is funny in retrospect, but even so. It was only after we saw what happened to the other idols players, the ones who were at the highest levels, like York especially, having all those players suddenly be essentially grabbed from their respective teams and be forced to play for the pods, and watching what happened with the shoe thieves it was a lot, to say the least. Like, sitting there watching it live, watching how, I'll admit the Shoe Thieves are my second favorite team, but seeing them get absolutely demolished during a time when they're supposed to win, like, their championship. The fact that they would like finally be able to ascend, if I remember correctly, for them to suddenly have a literal boss battle was shocking. And after the fact, when we saw that they all got the flinch modification, it was angst central from there, imagining what would have happened to the players and wondering if, and seeing that literally their battle against what is essentially a god had traumatized them this much. So the final when the final battle with the crabs, with the Hall Stars actually going in and seeing our own KeCh Familia and Workman Gloom up to bat against the pods, it was kind of nice because with I failed to mention Workman Gloom earlier, and I feel bad because he is one of my genuine favorites. We kind of lured him to, I personally saw it as him sort of rebelling against the umpires for hitting that home run almost immediately after he got incinerated. So for him to come up to bat and as the Hall Stars and play a hand in taking down the shelled one for good was it 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 brought a lot of emotions to say the least. And of course, everything else after that, I'd like to think that he's finally retired. He's finally released. He and KeCh are both released from Blaseball, so we'll probably never see them play again. But I'd like to think they're doing much better now after the shelled one. The talkers, I know for a fact the rest of the talkers were quite relieved that we didn't have to deal with the shelled one for a while. So it was good. It was a lot.
Following up on what you mentioned about the star picture Polkadot Patterson, what is CNMMUE or Polkammunion?
Polkammunion. So, as some people might know, I am rather a big fan of Polkadot Patterson. Polkadot Patterson being our star pitcher who was trapped in a peanut shell for several seasons. And when we realized that it seemed like the monitor was going to eat one of the shelled players, we kind of offered up Dot to them, basically because we wanted to see what would happen, but also because, we trusted the monitor. We figured, since we had been essentially worshipping the monitor, that maybe it would reward us for our devotion and, save our pitcher and not eat them. So that we came up with this plan called Polkammunion, because Polkadot was going to commune with the monitor, also known as CNNMMUE, however you want to pronounce that, CNMMUE. And we basically, told the league to idolize Dot so they would be the highest shelled player on the idol board and the monitor would go after them. And I remember being extremely nervous about this because, I wanted to believe they would be okay, but also, I was kind of afraid that they wouldn't be or that, we wouldn't get them back. And I remember very specifically, this is one of the Blaseball moments. I remember very much where I was when it happened. I was in the car on the way to visit my family for Thanksgiving, and I was just desperately hoping that, we didn't drive through a spot with where my service would cut out and I'd miss whatever happened. I'm just there, staring at my phone oh my God, what's going to happen? But you know what? It worked. It turned out great, actually. The monitor unshelled Dot and they got to narrowly escape being part of the shelled one's pods, and they just became a little bit squiddish, and everything was good and fine.
When the moist one showed up, we all just started spamming in chat communion with excitement, and I believe someone, I don't remember who specifically, but someone made the mistake of a typo, and you know what happens when you put a typo in chat. So communion became Conmui, and we all just ran with it, and finding out that literally being freed by the moist one gives you the squiddish modification and you are free And it was for us, the ones who have been running after this damn giant squid for so long. Yeah, no, this is our friend now. This is our we want to keep this giant squid. This is our monitor now. Sure, he's got a job and maybe several, but like this one's ours. We're keeping him. This one's okay.
Yeah, it was putting Dot in the squid, the monitor spot on the idle board, one of the shelled players at the time, and us choosing to believe that good things were going to come of it, that the monitor would take care of us and take care of Dot. And they did.
We sort of leaned on the image that as the wet team, the monitor couldn't and wouldn't hurt us, and was in fact our moist god, here to help the league in general and the talkers specifically. So this is where the idea of the Polka Dot's communion, or the Polkammunion, was born. So it's like, well, no, clearly this is a sign from this moist god that being squiddish is to act as his herald, like the Silver Surfer of the trench, as it were.
And you've talked about this a little bit already, but any further thoughts on the monitor?
Obviously, I revere the moist one, as many of us do. I think it's hilarious that the monitor showed up at the end of season 6, and we kind of collectively as a team looked at the monitor and said, they look moist. And we decided to just kind of wholly embrace the monitor as this like divine entity that we would follow and worship. And to me, I think one of the funnier moments is us sitting in the chat and kind of going like, so if the monitor is a heal, we're going to go heal, right? And everyone being like, yeah. We're gonna do whatever the monitor's doing. And yeah, the monitor is I would say kind of one of the unofficial people of the team, one of the unofficial parts of the Moist Talkers, whether the monitor knows it or not.
Oh yeah, so when the monitor first showed up, it was basically, this mysterious giant squid that came from the Hall of Flame. And I think probably a lot of the other teams were more uncertain about it, but as soon as we saw it, we went, oh my god, the moist one! And basically, almost immediately, just totally devoted ourselves to the monitor. And, we went all in on anything monitor related, like going for the tiny eggs blessings so we could, give it the tiny eggs it wanted, and, offering Dot's shell to the monitor in the hopes that it would save them, which it did.
I will also say, like, the moment when it was, like, much after the Discipline era, during the expansion era, when we were trying to navigate our teams around, we all almost unanimously agreed to go to the Hall of Flame, despite there several others suggesting, hey, we could like actually go to the Reader or go to the desert, go literally anywhere else, because they seem to have more lore implications. But we just thought, nah, we want to be with the monitor. And slowly making our way up there, and finally the monitor just sort of like openly acknowledging us.
There was never any question about whether we would go to the hall, because, that's where the monitor was. Like, it was just immediate, okay, we're going to the hall to see the monitor. And, we were rewarded for that. And we got there, and it, greeted us like old friends, said, hey, talkers. And, that was, I feel like, such a big moment for our team. And, like, honestly, like, shout out to TGB for that, because that was like, it was like they really had taken notice of our team and our culture and what the monitor meant to us, and, kind of rewarded us for that by having it be acknowledged, in canon. And I think that's really great.
It was having everyone sort of like see the monitor just go, "Hey, Moist Talkers," is a special moment for me, honestly. Like after all these seasons, by sheer coincidence, we latched onto this squid, and for it to openly acknowledge us, be friendly with us, really, having freed one of our fans' most favorite player for essentially being what I could only say as like our favorite character that isn't part of our team. I don't know how to describe it. I know I could just simply say it was positive, but like it's a lot more than that.
I mean, the Moist God believes in us and guides us to victory through Polka Dot Patterson, but that's a little bit more in the narrative play. He's a friendly entity rather than the antagonistic forces of both the Shelled One and what will come up later in the boss, or the coin if you prefer. He's just overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, and most of all, just the league in general's friend. And honestly, he deserves all the tiny eggs he wants.
Right, and with the talk of the Rise and Fall, the Shelled One, that was the end of an era. And with the next era came plenty to expand on, with the terms of the game, but also in terms of the lore and team culture, most notably being the arenas. So I'd like to talk a bit about the expansion era and the Gleek. Can you describe, as best you can, the Gleek Arena?
So coming up to the Gleek, you'll see a stylized mouth that sort of beckons you in through, like, on top of the tongue and past the teeth, because, aesthetics matter.
Like the most well-known interpretation of the Gleek, which I also like agree with, kind of, is it's this giant mouth. It's a massive mouth, kind of damp, with the surrounding fence being where the dugout is and where people can be sitting. The stadiums are all teeth. Where the pitching and the bases are is where the tongue is, and the rest of it is just the rest of the mouth, really. And yeah, that's how we kind of, someone had drew it a while back. I think it was Aves or Avery who did the initial like rough sketch of that, or it could be Q. One of those two. They were been there for like since the beginning.
And the concourse rings out in cries of the food vendors hawking their questionable wares. Because if there's nothing else that the Moist Talkers like, it's something that's good but gross. The infield is lightly flooded with a deeper pool and a coral reef in the foul ball zone, which hosts a variety of unique wildlife not seen anywhere else in the world. The bases are suspended on floating buoys on the surface of what is assured to the public to be, quote, water, end quote.
Just kind of damp, just kind of moist. We have the immateria out in the field. It's probably about ankle deep. You have the splash zones for the fans.
Kind of gotta, slosh through mysterious fluids on the field. Your socks are always wet. You hate it here.
And the higher walls are designed to bolster our team's preferred strategy of the small, impactful plays over the bigger, showier home runs. The entrances around the arena to the Underarena are very clearly marked, out of the fear that anyone would wander in unwillingly. The Players' Lounge is well appointed and as clean as can be considered, and you also have the Marine Biology Lab / Medical Centre for all our semi-aquatic related players.
When we got the opportunity to actually customize the arena in game, we kind of, I guess, leaned into that and, wanted to do basically anything to make it more moist, like more flooding weather and stuff. Yeah, so the Gleek is basically, we have this whole thing of you hate it here, where basically, it's kind of not very appealing to all the visiting teams.
It's definitely a weird place. You could even go as far as to say you hate it here.
What is the Underarena?
The Underarena is the catacombs-like tunnels underneath the Gleek. I like to think of the Underarena as a place that's a character. It has a mind of its own. It definitely will hurt or help somebody depending on how it feels about them. It also is to many people where the Leviathan came from. The Leviathan being one of the entities that is around the Gleek Arena. Oftentimes she likes to fly around above the games as they're being played. And depending on who you ask, although I think the consensus is heading that way now, the Leviathan is Richmond Harrison's mom. So she and possibly Richmond are from the Underarena.
So the Underarena, at least to me, is that it's the labyrinth beneath the Gleek, beneath the Moist Talkers Arena, and it is occasionally a tourist attraction. So you might encounter hordes of drowned undead wandering through, but they're really nothing to worry about. The only thing you really have to be concerned about is former Mascot, the belligerent phlegm receptacle, which got moved down into the catacombs for the safety of guests and players alike. There is a chance, although maybe small, that you find Hobbs Kane's secret warlock library, or encounter the Leviathan, which is the guardian spirit of the Gleek, and I guess Moist Talkers in general. But most of all, your socks have never been wetter, and you hate it here. Lovingly.
And it's underneath is like a huge maze of tunnels, and you can get lost there and maybe never come out. There's all kinds of hostile things like the belligerent phlegm receptacle and the maw, and just it's generally not a good place to be unless you're familiar with it and you know your way around, and it kind of knows you and recognizes you and perhaps likes you, depending on if you want to see it as a somewhat sentient place or not.
The Underarena is kind of what I interpreted as like both under the Gleek Arena. It's kind of like where people would be getting their confectionaries, their foods, that's where the locker rooms are, the place where the rest of the talkers would be hanging out and sitting, where the shadows would be sometimes. And we kind of viewed it as this massive labyrinth of sorts where it's always wet, it's always damp, it smells a little funny, but you get used to it. But even if you are used to the Underarena, like you've lived there before, there's still so much of it that is seemingly unexplored, with different types of flora and fauna that is seemingly known for lasting in damp, dark places would be. It's also where the Leviathan lives. The Leviathan being this, I'd like to think, essentially a guardian for the talkers. The only figure who could really actually the only two figures who could actually understand the Leviathan were Hobbs Kane and Richmond Harrison. Richmond sort of being viewed as someone who is kind of like a son to the Leviathan, and Hobbs being the only individual who could actually understand such arcane language. Even now, we still don't fully have a concrete idea of what the Underarena is. I believe recently we kind of viewed it as like a backroom situation for a more modern take, where it's like those images where it's all those 70s style pools with clear turquoise water that seem to go nowhere and everywhere. It's a fun place to like think about in terms of like lore, but at the same time, it's nothing that stays concrete.
But I love the idea that it's this weird catacombs-like entity that loves or hates you, and maybe or maybe not has a hot topic down there, depending on how it feels.
With the addition and the subsequent modifications to the Gleek, there was a lot of fun to be had in the expansion era, but also some sorrows. What does the chant "For York" mean to you?
So, on the road to a championship run, because we were doing fairly well that season, seeing fan favourite, I think league favourite, York Silk, struck down by a rogue umpire was a little bit hard for some people to bear. So he kind of became a symbol to rally behind, even as capitalism and overcorrections and ratings threatened the great game of Blaseball. So I guess using that cry of "For York" and winning the big one was about the least we could do to honour his memory. And I think the team took that to heart because they started playing like they just hadn't before.
For York, that was, I guess, the first really, and maybe the biggest moment that the Talkers had in the expansion era. I mean, it was a few seasons in, things had been not too bad for us compared to other teams. It had been a long time since we had an incineration. It had been 7 whole seasons. We were doing pretty well. And then York Silk, who was, that's our dork. That's a third of the teen squad. We love him.
Editor's note, the teen squad was 3 players considered to be teenagers and best friends at the time in the lore. These were Commissioner Vapor, Jesus Coke, and, of course, York Silk.
He was very suddenly incinerated, and it was a shock for all of us and for the whole league, really. And as a team, we just really kind of rallied behind this message of, we're going to win this for York. And suddenly we'd never been, super concerned with winning, but all of a sudden it became, the most important thing. Like, we have to win this season for York. And, we had a good team that season, and it was very doable. And so, we were just really kind of leaning very hard into it. I mean, and we even had this whole thing about, we're going to finish the season with 69 wins for York. And we did. And we only did because, at the very last minute, we got an extra win from like a Sun 2 game. We were playing the Thieves. A bunch of former Talkers players haunted Esme and struck out to help us secure the win. And it started to feel, that the players also were, actively trying harder for York. I mean, we had just got Dot back this season, and after York died, they won every single one of their games and pitched a shutout in the finals. Alston Cerveza had absolutely incredible postseason performance. He had something like almost a 0.9 on base percentage with runners in scoring position or something. And Lucian Patchwork, York's replacement, hit some notable home runs in the playoffs. And it just, it really felt like the team, both in and out of the game, was responding to York dying and, really going, okay, we are going to win this for York. And we did. And it was our first championship, and it was a championship that really meant a lot. We had, a parade, and we invited the Fridays. We were sharing our memories of York, and it was, it was bittersweet, but, it was memorable, and it was great. And then the next day, York got necromancied, and that kind of really ruined the mood a bit. But you know what? It was nice while it lasted, and I still look back on it as, one of my favorite Talkers memories.
Gosh. What's funny is that's our first championship, and we didn't have control of anything. In reality, it's we're watching numbers on a spreadsheet. We're watching a computer make dice rolls, but the catharsis of having lost York Silk at the end of the season 14, and then going through the playoffs and winning a championship with this slogan for York. We're going to do it for York. We're going to win this for him in his memory. It was actually a really incredible season. It was an incredible story and this kind of incredible rallying cry. And it's also, to me, another case of the teams coming together, the Fridays and the Talkers. I think that really kind of opened this permanent bond with the Fridays, and they mourned York just as much as we did. So getting to win that championship was just this beautiful moment. Yeah, we had a nice story with For York. We had this nice cathartic moment, and I love it.
It's for our dork. I mean, seeing York get incinerated, even now it hurts a little, because we didn't expect it to happen. We were so sure that we were going to get to the finals, the semifinals. We're going to have the whole teen squad with us, and we were all, I remember thinking, oh boy, this is going to be so much fun to write, like how they'd be celebrating the fact that we won our first championship together. And then to see him gone with someone new and having someone new come in, Lucy, this is going to sound a little silly, but it was like seeing your favorite individual suddenly go away and never come back. Realizing that you would never be able to have this character be with you, that the friends, he's not going to be with his friends ever for as far as we could tell. After he has finally been able to like settle down, be able to reconcile with his lost childhood, with his lost innocence, and bring back some joy, and having that life sort of snuff out of nowhere, or I guess be set ablaze to the point of nothingness, it hurt a lot. So when we started saying for York, it's not just like, oh, we're going to win this championship for York. I feel it was also, we're doing this monumental thing for York as we remember him, as this little kid who absolutely used to love the sport, for this kid who has two best friends who miss him dearly, for this kid who was loved by everyone. So we did it for York.
All right, now to take this to a bit of a lighter note, can you describe your favorite mascot?
Oh, yeah. So the Talkers, we're an interesting team in that we don't have one specific mascot. We kind of have this whole thing where we get a new mascot every season. And, some of them get more attention than others, which is why, I feel like my answer is going to be a more obvious one, but I'm very fond of Buddy, who is Commissioner Vapor's totally normal dog, who is definitely not at all an eldritch squid. He is, perfectly normal dog. I don't know why anyone would ever insist otherwise. He's a very good boy. Though for a more obscure pick, I feel like I have to kind of shout out to I think they call it the Husk, which was the remnants of Dot's shell after the Monitor freed them from the shell, which has like all these nice messages of hope written on it for, wanting Dot to be free and like wanting to defeat the shelled one and stuff, which I just think is a nice sentiment. And also I am very biased towards Dot related things.
God, we have so many mascots. I hope we keep this bit up with the mascots. I hope we have a mascot every season. It's really fun, and as Nick put it, Nick of Blaseball Cares, Nick, It's a really fun way for somebody to participate, because Nick says that her first contribution was Buddy and making Buddy a mascot. And Buddy actually might be my favorite mascot. Maybe 1976 Volkswagen GT Golf Mark 1.
Playing off of season 6, we had Jerry the intern as the person in the Richmond Harrison costume. Pictured as working for ever increasing amounts of exposure, but never any actual money. Would go out of his way to lighten the hearts of many, even before the feedback-related tragedy struck, but ended up doubling down on the act to try and lift spirits. So I think he's still behind the scenes doing all number of odd jobs that management need doing but don't want to pay for, in the hopes of, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and getting noticed.
There's two that come into mind. One was the Moist Owlet. This was before my time, like season 2, I believe, where it was this really, really wet, like, mishmash of paper towels and garbage that is shaped of an owl, called the Moist Owlet. But by far, I think my favorite was Buddy, CV's dog? Question mark? Because this was right after Workman got incinerated, and I remember being really, really heartbroken by it. Buddy ended up being like not just like a fun mascot in general, but also, like, for me at least, a nice little like way to cope with gloom and accept CV. And now I'm just like ride or die for this dog.
Right, certainly, yeah. Buddy has been a popular answer for sure. Well, we were all having a great time in the expansion era with the changes. Some of them came due to poor management behind the scenes, and they were certainly springing some leaks of immateria. And this led to a new, unique weather that the talkers took to very fondly. Can you describe what was the Moist Talkers' relationship with flooding? And if you recall, what was Operation Splashdown?
The concept of having a weather that literally floods everything, making your entire like arena a splash zone. Oh boy, we ate it up. We constantly wanted to find ways to see how we can use flooding to our advantage. It did make us filthy. Like, I remember whenever we would check to see, oh, how is our arena doing, the filth was immense. And we just went, yes, good, perfect. This is the ideal Blaseball arena. We must have more flooding. We must manifest more flooding. And that's kind of what I remember vividly of it.
Oh yeah, well, we loved flooding weather. I mean, it was so on brand for us. I mean, like, mysterious liquid flooding the stadium, like that's exactly what we're all about. And it was a relatively safe weather too. Like, I mean, it could sweep your players elsewhere, but it's not gonna incinerate them or put them on another team or anything. So it was the kind of thing that we could easily embrace without really having to worry about it. And so we basically jumped at every chance to have as much flooding weather as possible and basically become as moist as we possibly could. And we went all in on blessings like high pressure and H2O blood, and putting flooding plus in our stadium and all kinds of things like that to basically have as much flooding weather as possible and get the benefits of it, like performing better when we have players on base in flooding weather. And I mean, even when we got 3 championships and evolved, our Evo mod was based around flooding because that's our thing. That's what we're all about. And yeah, so I mean, we called it Operation Splashdown, basically this kind of plan to get all the flooding themed mods and build our team around flooding.
So when the flood weather was discovered, its effects sort of became pivotal to our building strategy of the small ball, which was the small impactful hits over the big smashes. Because if opponents couldn't stay on the base out of fear of getting washed away and having their progress undone, then it didn't really matter how many walks or 3 base runs they could get if they just couldn't clinch it and get home before being swept off base. But obviously nothing bad ever happens to the Moist Talkers, so it would only ever affect the opposing team, obviously. So we kind of leant into it and tried to get as much of it happening as we could.
So this might be another one of my favorite talkers things is once we kind of got past the trauma of elsewhere, which is when players would get swept off the field in a wave of immateria and sent somewhere. Once we kind of got past that, we started to really push for. I went through and I looked a while back, and we started to push for stadium improvements that would result in more flooding, just more flooding. And I think it's really us just going, it's funny, the stadium is wetter. Let's make the stadium wetter. No, wetter, more. And so we got flooding a lot. We got those waves of immateria a lot. And eventually, what happened was blessings started appearing that benefited flooding. And we said, I was not part of this. I just kind of remember it happening. I remember Operation Splashdown being kind of a big organizing thing for us. That the people thought like we can take this flooding that we have and we can make it work for us. Like manifest pressure. And we ended up having a team that was really good, partially in thanks to us making just a really inhospitable stadium for a lot of other people, based kind of on a bit. And I think that's kind of a perfect encapsulation of the talkers is committed to the bit and then made the bit work for us.
All right, now you do mention the talk of Filth and a lot of new stats that were added to teams towards the end of the expansion era. As things were ramping up, pressure was building, and at the end it did all come to a head. So let's talk a little bit about the Moist Talkers, evolution, and the end of the world. If you know, what was the statistical anomaly called the Filth Zone?
Yeah, so, I'm not, super up on what the details of that were, because, all kinds of weird expansion era mechanics and chaos, but, basically, we did something to make our team, filthy, and so we ended up in this totally isolated position on the chart, far away from the other teams, and basically that was the Filth Zone, because we were the only team who was willing to be that filthy, because it's very on brand for us.
So just looking at the charts, you would have everyone clustered together, and then way off on the side of this is bad for filth levels, there's the Moist Talkers. So the filth zone was this little aura around the talkers that just no one would be willing to enter. Because mechanically it's not good for you. Narratively, it's gross.
Well, I mean, when you have a player that is a sentient garbage blob, several mascots that are gross / trash adjacent are literal one of our favorite lines or chants is, or I guess motto is be gross and be kind. The Filth Zone is kind of like our thing. And the fact that no other team could come towards the Filth Zone, even if they wanted to, kind of made it extra special for us. Because, this is our spot. We are the Filth Zone. Thank you for noticing.
See, here's where I start. It's where it gets fuzzy for me, because in the division of hits and spits, I was definitely on the spits side. I was definitely on the lore side of things, not the statistics side. My understanding is there's a stat called Pog. I don't know what Pog does. I just know it put us into the filth zone. What was it? What was our anomaly?
The filth zone is a stat. So when something that came towards the end of the expansion era was the great chart of the weights of all of the teams for all the 24 Blaseball teams.
Mhm.
They had levels that would go up and down based on their weight, or I think there was some. It wasn't exactly weight. It was something parallel to weight. And you'd go up on the chart the lighter you are, or lower on the chart the heavier you were. And you could also move left or right on the chart, and it was never fully explained what moved a team to the left or to the right. But the Society for Internet Blaseball Research got together and found acronyms or terms. I'm not sure how they came up with them, but the terms they gave the stats that would either move your team to the left or to the right were called POG or cringe. And the Moist Talkers had a very unique strategy of building up a ton of filth and making our stadium very heavy, and then just flipping switches to try and make certain things negative to balance it out. We had a very unique strategy that no one else tried, and a very, very filthy stadium that most other team, I'm pretty sure almost, as far as I know, every other team tried to keep their stadium clean. Whereas we did the opposite and then just flipped the density of our filth to negative, which made us a statistical anomaly. And so we were very far on the chart from everyone else.
Editor's note, it was actually the fact that we had evolved our players so much and also won a blessing that evolved our shadows that moved us so far to the right, as evolution was cringe. I am unsure if the filth was related.
And so there was a whole wide area of the chart which was empty, except just for us. And the joke was, the joke was that no one else would come near us on the chart because we were so filthy. And that's how I understood what the filth zone was. I'm sure there's some inaccuracies.
I love that we were like, oh, we can make our stadium grosser, huh? Yeah, let's make our stadium grosser. I love the filth zone so much. I remember it. I remember the chart and just us over at the very far right, just in the filth zone. Yeah, I love that. That's so funny. And people at it, is it Cyber? I go by Cyber. I say Cyber. They always just impress the crap out of me. They're always just like they're data witches in the best way possible.
All right. Now, with everything going wrong, some things did go right. The Moist Talkers did manage at the last possible moment to claim the last championship of Blaseball and evolved. Can you explain what is the modification Floodbath?
Yeah, so it was a very chaotic time to win a third championship and evolve, because we won season 23, season 24, the world was ending, so we got this Evo mod called Floodbath, and all we knew about it at the time was that it would make players slippery, and we didn't know what that meant because it hadn't activated yet, and the world was ending, and we were, just kind of sitting around, just like desperately hoping we'd get to see what it did at least once before the world ended. And we did get to see it.
As I understand it, Floodbath it makes our players slippery. And what happens is I believe an immateria rush has to happen first. Is that right? And that once that happens, any player that should have gotten washed away now can, when they make it home, slip past home and go right back to first base.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love it because it really fits for our team, and it really leans into our whole Operation Splashdown of building our team around flooding.
The only spits of it I remember is that Slippery came about because the Leviathan would lick the players, her little babies that she loved, and they would get slippery because of it, which I thought was very cute.
Oh, geez, yeah. You know what? I totally forgot. But yeah, we did. So we basically lured it as the Leviathan, basically, who has kind of come out from the Underarena in recent seasons and is spending more time above ground again and looking after the team. And she would lick the players, and that's how they become slippery. And basically get to slide around on Leviathan spit, which is, again, very on brand for us.
I'm pretty sure only London really was able to proc it, and which made us very excited because we had a slippery egg on our hands. I think that was the first and only time we really saw that happen, but yeah.
Many things were revealed as everything else was crashing down. We got the library and discovered a little bit of history before the Internet Blaseball League. What do you know about the Canada Artists and the Topeka Moist Talkers, and how do you feel about that?
So these are both teams from the prehistory of the Internet League of Blaseball, which was the Ultra League of Blaseball, I believe, and formative to the talkers of today. The Canada Artists were incinerated as a team rather than individual players due to now CEO or commissioner or whatever his position actually is these days, Parker McMillan's Firewalker instability ability.
They had a fire protector named Agan Espinoza who basically saved all the players from incineration when the team was incinerated. So Agan and the team as a concept were incinerated, but the rest of the players survived and went on to become the Topeka Moist Talkers. And I guess in the current league, when they brought Blaseball back, they kind of combined the two names, perhaps in honor of the two teams, and made the Canada Moist Talkers.
I personally think it's kind of funny that the Canada Artists were a thing, considering, the group of 7 artists that were world famous and hailed from Canada, different parts of Canada. So I thought that was a little funny for my art history brain, but yeah.
And as things came to a close and the world was ending and the black hole consumed everything behind us, the talkers rocketed away and rushed to the hall. Why did the talkers rush to the hall, and what happened when we got there?
Yeah, I know some teams, kind of had to have a whole big discussion about what direction they were going to go, but for us, there was never any question. We were going to go right to the hall because, that's where the monitor was.
Plain and simple, we just wanted to see Binky one last time.
Partially because we both love and respect our moist god, of course, but it mechanically, incidentally happened to be the closest place to maneuver to after the conversion of the arena into a spaceship because of the aforementioned Filth zone. We were all the way over on one side where everyone else was more in the middle, So we kind of had a head start. So it was a combination of the narrative aligning to our interests anyway, but also mechanically it's just like, well, we'd be silly not to. We're basically right there.
I think one answer, one cynical answer, could be that it was the closest we were. The hall was firmly in the filth zone, but that's where the monitor is. That's where the moist one was, and I think it was a no brainer for us to be like, that's where the moist one is. That's where we're going, and so we did. We made a very short trip up to the hall, which was very funny because we got there quickly while everyone was zooming around that map that showed up.
The fact that we could actually go to the hall ourselves was an opportunity none of us really wanted. A lot of us really did not want to miss. So we just went up there. We stuck all the way to the far right, just inching our way up. And because of how our icon was situated, it kind of looked like we were licking the wall. So we all just unanimously agreed that yes, we are leveling our way up to the hall and no one can stop us.
And for, I would say, several hours in the chat were just people posting the word mlem over and over again. Just a talker saying outside the hall, licking the doors, which is also one of my favorite talkers memories. But that's also where we get the hey talkers moment. And the hey talkers moment is another one of my favorite memories. That's when the moist one actually spoke to us.
We ended up getting a message from the monitor that was broadcast out to the league in general, as the conversations and messages are wanted to do. But it was personalized, which made a lot of people very emotional. Because it's like, how often do you get acknowledged for the way that you've been playing? It was something like, hey talkers, how did you get here? Wow, slippery. But just like, although it's just text and a little picture, there was just something about it in the emotion of it that felt respected and comforted and looked after. And I don't know how much of that is a projection from the players to the game, or how much of that is the developers or what have you acknowledging the efforts of teams to build themselves up. But yeah, it was cool to see.
Not even hey moist talkers, it was straight up hey talkers. We all lost our minds. It was chaos. It was unfiltered, rambunctious joy that this giant squid who's been overworked to hell, that we have adored since the beginning, ever since we saw it, acknowledges us in such a casual manner. It was exciting. It was delightful. It brought so much joy.
And the monitor spoke to us, told us to hang out, but acknowledged us. And I think that was one of the most exciting moments we've had as a team. I often wonder if the game band understands how special that moment was to a lot of people, because it's something that still makes me smile.
The monitor helped us go rogue and go charge the mound and incinerate the coin. And it was just such a great way to end the era, I guess, like kind of the team just totally unified, going right to the hall, right to the monitor, where we've always had, I guess, such a connection with both those things, really. Like with us always, worshiping the monitor and helping it out and it helping us out. And also, us having a connection to the hall for, doing necromancy, and several of our players getting to leave the hall as hall stars and be released. And it just felt like such like the logical place to go at the end of the world. You know, why would we ever be anywhere else?
And talkers stayed by the hall or returned to the hall when the black hole expanded and consumed everything behind it. And that was the last of Blaseball as we knew it for a long time. What do you miss the most?
Gosh. I mean, I just it's I miss having the full community in our chat. We still have a chat, and now that fall ball is happening, people are a little bit more active, and it's really nice to see. But I miss just having the chat active. I miss having people around. I miss the weird stuff that happens, and I know I say weird a lot, but I think we get up to shenanigans a lot, and I think that, very highly of that. Like Nick Rudo, where all of a sudden everyone started to follow Nick's lead and act out Naruto scenes. I'm sorry, Nick Rudo scenes, excuse me. Or coming back after the egg hole was created, waking up in the morning to find that people in the chat had developed a game of pushing people into the egg hole using Carl, to roll whether or not someone got pushed into the egg hole. I missed that. I missed the creativity. I miss the way that everyone feeds off each other and bounces off each other. We still have that. Like I said, we still have that. And there's a lot of people still around, but I liked it when it was always busy. I'm looking forward to that again.
I think what I miss the most is getting to almost discover the stories of newer players and the backgrounds of these people that are just represented with a random name and a string of numbers. But doing that in a intensely creative community that just is unlike anything else that I think I've ever seen. Just the way that people come together seemingly out of nowhere to create intense works of art, and you have a team that's dedicated to music, so they're making albums. They're made a record label, like an actual real life company out of this game. So yeah, getting to be involved creatively with a community on this scale is, I think, what I miss the most out of it.
I guess I miss just the togetherness of it in general. I mean, obviously people are still around, and, we've had some fun times over the siesta, and it's been great to just, hang out in the chat, but also, it's not to the same extent. I mean, when Blaseball is going full blast, there's so much going on, we're all there cheering on our players, or, coming up with the latest weird bit, or just being silly, or having a big lore jam, and building on each other's ideas and doing all this stuff, and just being part of the team, and it's a little harder to feel like a team, I guess, when not as much stuff is going on. But we've been getting a bit of that with Fall Ball, which is nice. And whenever I look forward to when Blaseball actually comes back and we get to cheer on our team again, because even if the players are different, we're still the Moist Talkers, and I think that's what matters, really.
This is gonna sound cheesy, but I genuinely miss the players. I miss the fans, I mean. Being able to hop into the orb corner and talk spit about literally anything, especially about Blaseball, having our lore jams, having to talk about other players, what other teams are going through. that sort of sense of community was, especially during the pandemic, was a big deal. Because, yeah, you don't know these people all that well. They're practically strangers. But then again, you don't know these players either. They're practically strangers. Sure, you can, like, lore about them, but you don't really know them unless you see them, even after you see them play. But that didn't really matter because, hey, we're all sort of in the same boat in that matter. We're all kind of in the black holes, so might as well get comfy and, like, sort of hang out with that. And during the time period where Blaseball was under hiatus, yeah, sure, I got a lot of time to, like, focus on what was going on in personal stuff, but a part of me still kind of missed the vibrance and the buzz that came from hanging out in the main court and, like, doing stuff there. I know a lot of active talkers kind of either moved on to different teams or moved on to completely different stuff altogether. And, like, seeing everyone come back again, it's nice. It's not quite the same. Of course, Blaseball is never the same twice, but it's still like coming back to some place and going, yeah, this is still somewhat familiar. This is still new, but also familiar. And it's that familiarity was what I missed quite a bit, personally.
All right. Thank you very much for talking with me.
Yeah, thank you.
No, not at all. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, I'm KeCh, and I'm speaking to you from post-production. Thank you for listening to our sort of pilot episode for Moist Talk. I hope you've learned something about the Moist Talkers today, and why we love the team. Coming into the new Blaseball, we hope you'll stop by the Talkers Discord channels or side server. Feel free to talk to us there about any feedback about the podcast and what you'd like to hear about in future episodes. In the meantime, be kind, be gross. Let me leave you with one of my favorite parts from one of the earliest questions that I've saved for the end. Bye now.
The other thing I think about a lot is the tweet that the anchor put out as the world was ending in season 24 about the Moist Talkers. I saved it on my phone actually because it's like, when I think of the Moist Talkers, I think of this. He got it so right. And I know, I'm like, part of me is like, I know you're playing a character, but I hope you believe this because I believe this. And that tweet says, I gave them a hard time because I knew they could take it. In many ways, they're the strongest team in Blaseball. Self-assuredness, earnestness, pride in being weird, and ability to pick themselves up and try again and again. These Canadians are heroes.